Alasdair, I've got one thing to say.
Oh, hello. Yes, what?
Symbiotic. I can't believe we're doing this episode. For context, for anyone who hasn't listened to the entire backlog of Wholala, we did an episode, season or so ago, where we were saying about our underrated Who episodes that we think are underrated. And we hit 42, and we talked about all these other episodes. And then I was like, you know what? It's the Crimson Horror.
Crimson Horror.
You did not agree.
I do not agree. I remembered it unfavorably, and I've just rewatched it. And my opinion didn't really change. I didn't maybe I didn't go in with an open mind enough. I wasn't ready to absorb it as oh, it's an underrated camp classic making an important social commentary. I just was okay. Every time it kind of moved on to the next thing, I was okay, sure.
See, even on rewatch, I had a different view from you. I really like this episode.
No, yeah, great.
I'm not here to... Well, first of all, I'm not here to say you're wrong. And I'm also not here to say it is objectively good either.
Sure.
I just really like it. And also there's valid things that are just gross and icky with it, which we'll get into when we get into the meat of the episode. But I just come away from this being fun romp.
Fun romp. Yeah, maybe so. Maybe it takes me back to a time when I found Doctor Who a bit embarrassing. Around sixth form age, and I remember finding it embarrassing then and a little bit embarrassing now. But we'll go through it beat by beat, my thoughts. I've written down the loosest notes this week. You wouldn't believe. It is just a stream of consciousness in the notes.
He hasn't even uploaded it to the shared doc. We have a shared doc.
It's not even in the shared doc.
Alasdair says thoughts, insert here.
There's just a blank line because I don't think I've got none of my, some of my thoughts are developed. One or two of them are just kind of half ideas about what I thought are just very early reactions to this. So I'm coming into it quite malleable. I'm not coming geared up for a fight. But I may, make some feelings known about certain parts of the story when we get to them.
And I just want to say, I think the Crimson Horror is a fugly slut.
And I'm allowed to say that. But I was surprised going to it. So I watched it and I was like, well, everyone will have felt how I felt about that. And then I went through kind of all the the timescales reviews. I went through some of the Reddit threads about it. And very consistently, people are underrated story, underrated story, underrated story. And I was like, what? And people 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10. And I was ready to give it a 3.
I'd give this a good 6.5, probably.
Yeah. I was okay.
Okay.
So, anyway.
No, well, I'm excited to dive in. Like you said, I'm not here to tell you you're wrong, because I also don't think you're wrong. I just think it's stupid and fun. But let's get into it.
Stupid it is.
Stupid it is. Well, look, so if anyone hasn't gotten on, we're talking about the Crimson Horror, which is in Series 7B of Doctor Who, came out on May the 4th, 2013, Star Wars Day. What a way to celebrate Star Wars Day. There you go. It was written by Mark Gatiss and directed by Paul Metzstein, who had previously worked on Late Night Shopping, Guy X and Micromen. Not going to lie, never heard of any of those. Haven't heard of a single one. I'm so sorry. It had an overnight viewership of 6.47 million and an IMDb score of 7.2.
It's better than it's better than I thought it would be.
I don't think I'd rate it a 7.2, but between a 6 and a 7, sure.
Sure. It just for me is there's no way we're saying this is better than Space Babies, right? But I guess we are. So
I enjoyed this episode more than Space Babies. I'm not saying that means it's better, but I think I enjoyed it more. I don't think I would give my same attention. I don't know.
I certainly didn't enjoy this more than Space Babies.
Well, there you go. Well, look, so for anyone who hasn't watched the story in a while, it's on iPlayer. Go give it a watch. But if you would like a quick recap, here is the story. The episode opens in Victorian England, where the Paternoster gang are employed to look into the mystery of the Crimson Horror, where waxy red bodies are being found in the rivers of Yorkshire. They inspect one of them and see that their eye holds the image of the last thing that the corpse saw, the face of the Doctor.
They travel to Yorkshire and enlist Jenny to become a citizen of Sweetville, the mysterious compound created by Mrs. Gillyflower and the elusive Mr. Sweet. which they only want to populate with the most handsome and beautiful people. While there, Jenny sneaks off and uncovers what Mrs. Gillyflower's blind daughter calls her monster, the Doctor. However, he's been processed and had his body dipped in this strange red substance, causing him to have red, waxy skin, barely able to move and unable to speak.
He shows Jenny where to take him, and with the help of his sonic, undoes the process and is soon back to his normal form. He explains that him and Clara travelled here and were swept up in the Sweetville mystery, and both ended up being processed. The Doctor ended up as a reject, likely due to his alien biology, but Clara survived the process and was preserved in one of Sweetville's houses. They find her to break her out, reviving her also.
Vastra comes face to face with the mysterious red substance and realizes that she's seen it before. She recognized it as the venom of a prehistoric red leech, a parasite to the Silurians. The Doctor realizes that one must have survived and evolved, and it may have been getting help. They confront Mrs. Gillyflower and soon find out that her plan is to release the leech's toxin all over the planet via rocket, leaving only her perfect people in Sweetville to survive. She also reveals Mr. Sweet's true identity, the prehistoric leech quite literally leeching off her body.
No. The Doctor reveals that Ada, Mrs. Gillyflower's daughter, was actually blinded from experimentations her mother performed on her, and not through her abusive father, as she'd been told. Clara destroys the machine that will release the rocket with a very well-thrown chair, but Mrs. Gillyflower pulls out a gun and threatens to kill her own daughter if they try and stop her again. She takes her hostage up the stairs to manually release the rocket, but soon see that the gang have taken the venom from aboard the ship, and it explodes empty.
Mrs. Gillyflower slips and falls to her death, and Mr. Sweet crawls off her dying body as it realizes she's no use to it anymore. She asks her daughter for forgiveness, which she doesn't get, and dies in front of her. The Doctor says he'll bring Mr. Sweet back to the Jurassic period, but not before Ada finds it and beats it to death with her walking stick. The gang head back to the TARDIS, and Clara heads inside. Jenny reminds the Doctor that he still hasn't explained how Clara is here when she died in London at Christmas, but he leaves them, still without an explanation.
Dropping her off in the present day, Clara heads into the house that she babysits at and finds photos of her throughout time on her open laptop. She's confronted by Angie and Artie, the children that she babysits, who tell her that they've worked out she's travelling in time. They show her photos from her adventures during Cold War and Hyde, and even a photo of her in Victorian England that even she doesn't recognise. They demand a trip in the time machine. Ruh-roh!
Ruh-roh. Oh my god, just to quickly pick up on that ending, I was like, ugh, these kids are so annoying. And I said to the boyfriend who has recently had to come along for all these rewatches with me, and I was like, I'm so glad they never did a story with those kids in. They're so annoying. And then it did the next time episode, and I was like, oh.
They are so. I actually rewatched the Nightmare in Silver episode fairly recently, and again, like in these episodes, I can find fun in them. I don't like hate any of them, but I really don't like them. I was like, these are not. But like, and then later, I feel like you see them do stories with young kids, like in Series 8, and it's just done better. Like I enjoy it more.
It's just that type of writing a child, but in a way that like it's almost like done like someone who's never met kids. Like,
you don't know the Doctor because you're stupid.
They're just they're like they behave like kids do in plays, like in the talking bits of musicals, like very like, we know the truth, and if you don't let us come in the TARDIS, we're gonna tell Dad. And I'm like, ugh, like, why are you being like that? Stop.
I'd be like, all right, tell him, and then be like, look at it, and then be like, wow, yeah, all those photos do look like her.
That's weird.
How weird.
Did you Photoshop them? I don't care. She obviously isn't a time traveler. What are we doing? What are we doing? What are we doing? Why is she like, oh god,
Literally.
God, I better take them.
She's like, well, now I'm going to have to take them to a space moon.
I have to give them some bribe money. I have to pay them off. I can't have people find out.
Oh my god. Well, look, before we dive into more about how we hate the children, we reached out to you on your X account, and here is what some of you had to say about the episode.
At Leon's_lifespan said, it's so overhated. It's a bit silly and weird, but that's what makes it fun for me.
Nathan said, whilst it's not perfect, especially that gross Eleven and Jenny kiss, the episode was a lot of fun, and I loved the Victorian era detective story this started out as. Really made me wish that we got that Pattern Onto the Gang spin-off. I agree.
Ollie said, underrated. I don't get the hate for it. It's silly camp fun.
Jax said, Diana Rigg is an instant top-tier villain whose cruelty is heartbreaking yet delicious. She's the standout for me, although Ada and Jenny are stellar in this too. And the dynamics between Diana and her real-life daughter, Rachel, are beautifully emotive. Stunning acting.
Oh, is that her real daughter?
That's her real daughter, real life. I know. We are also lucky enough to have a couple of voice notes sent to us this week. See, there's passion behind this episode. There is passion.
There's so much passion for this. I feel out of step.
No, I'm not. I love episodes of Wholala where we don't really agree with each other on it, because you and me, you know us, we're not argumentative with each other. We're also never going to tell anyone they're not allowed to like an episode of Doctor Who. But I just love it, Mick. I love it.
I'm sat here with my fists gripped tight. I'm turning red. I'm like, yes.
Your earrings are off.
It's casual, Sam. It's absolutely fine. I'm like actively muting my mic, punching holes in the wall over the Crimson Horror.
I hate this episode.
I don't want to do the podcast anymore.
Well, our first voice note is sent in from Laura.
Hello, lovely Wholala boys and listeners. I was so thrilled when I saw that you were doing the Crimson Horror on the pod this week that I thought, I am going to have to butt in and offer an opinion here. I am a real lover of this episode. I think if you're going to have a guilty pleasure episode of Doctor Who, this one is definitely mine. This episode is a bit silly. It's a bit fun. It has got a camp old lady villain played by Dame Diana Rigg with a weird little red parasite thing that apparently lives on her chest. Why not? You don't need high stakes villains in Doctor Who all the time, as far as I'm concerned. This episode does have some lines of dialogue that genuinely make me laugh, with the whole attack of the supermodels thing. And when Drax wanders off going, I'm going to go and play with my grenades. That line comes into my head at really inopportune moments in my life. I will say, obviously, this episode does have some fairly questionable moments, particularly when the Doctor kisses Jenny. It's not the nicest of scenes, we'll say, but, you know, we'll kind of just put that aside for a second. But I do think this episode has some really sweet moments as well, particularly between Ava and the Doctor. I really love the moment when he sees her for the first time once he's back to his normal self. And he goes over to her and he crouches and he lets her touch his face so that she knows that that is who she had been talking to this whole time and who she had confided in, sort of like knowing that she would value that physical touch and that physical confirmation that that is who she had been speaking to this whole time. And I just think that moment's really sweet. I really liked Ava's character. She was quite fun, really, given that all the sort of the horrible things that had happened to her. And I think if we had ever got that Paternoster Gang spin-off, I could fully have seen her being a regular in that. It'd have been cool to see what she had got up to. But as I said, this episode I think it's a really good reminder that Doctor Who does not have to be that serious sometimes. And at the end of the day, it is just a lovely little adventure sci-fi show. And it is okay to have an episode that is just a bit silly. And I think that is something that people maybe sometimes need to be reminded of when watching Doctor Who. Present company not included, of course. But yeah, thank you for hearing me out. I look forward to hearing the episode. Thanks, bye.
What lovely thoughts. What lovely, well-articulated thoughts.
Very well
It's nice to
articulated.
hear something very positively said about this. And also, look, I'm not going to deny there's a lot of delightful silliness in this as well. And a lot of the performances, specifically from Dame Diana Rigg, are excellent. That's all I'll say. That's all I'll say.
No, I completely agree, Laura. I love it is a silly one. It's funny because this is an episode that like could have a real big message behind it about like judging people on their appearances and what you believe is like the quote unquote right type of person. And there's a lot of subtext this could have. And I don't think this episode actually has any of it, for better or for worse, which does make it the silly episode it is. I love the humour as well. Again, I'll save my thoughts too much for when we're actually talking about them in our little section. But yeah, really, really agree. And I'm hoping I will really agree with what Hamish has to say in his voice note.
Hi, Martha. Hi. Love the show. I love you guys. And I love the Crimson Horror. I don't know what it is about it particularly. This is why I can't come onto the show and defend it like I did Love and Monsters, because really I just like it because it's stupid. I feel Doctor Who has the greatest premise in the world. You can do anything, you can do any genre, and yet the fans I think they quite like Doctor Who to remain the same. They like their alien invasions. They like their base under sieges. And I like that this episode is such a zag into a different tone. I don't know if it's ever been fully confirmed that it was a backdoor pilot for a Paternoster Gang spin-off series, but it might as well be. And it's sort of an example of a what if we got that show? And that's why I cling to it very tightly. It almost feels like K9 and Company to me. It's so kind of off track because it's also kind of the 11th Doctor's only real Doctor Light episode, I think. And I don't know. I also love that the threat is not really alien. There is an alien element to it, but I love that it's just a mad old lady. And I can't hate an episode with the line, "Do you know what these are, Doctor? The wrong hands." It's camp as can be. And I think it's Mark Gatiss's most Mark Gatiss-y episode, if you're familiar with his League of Gentlemen work, stuff like that. But I'm really happy that you're doing such a divisive episode, and I would love to see you do more. This is what Doctor Who is all about. Keep up the good work. Bye, Martha. Bye.
Bye, Martha. Bye.
Bye, Martha. Bye. You know, these are Doctor. The wrong hands was excellent. Okay, was
really
excellent.
was.
I'm being slowly defrosted by these notes towards the episode.
Well, I like that Hamish was also saying that it is a divisive episode because I agree with you. I think I see a lot of people, especially in my little echo chamber, of people like underrated classic, love it, love it, love it. But like, there's also a huge amount of people that hate this episode.
So I serve an important role in balancing actually a lot of love this week for this episode. So it's actually important that my voice is heard.
Yeah, I agree. You know what? I don't think there's any voice as more important as yours is right now.
But really interesting about, me all the time. I don't think it's really interesting saying that this is almost like a pilot for, not a pilot for, but almost like a template for kind of how the Paternoster Gang adventures would work. The Doctor is so redundant in this story. He is useless. They turn up, and it's not until like the 14, 15-minute mark that they even find him. And at that point, they're like, "Oh no, you can't speak." Of course. And then
I'm going to have to save you.
He does turn up, and he doesn't stop the rocket. He doesn't remove the poison. That's, you know, the gang does that. He doesn't intervene to prevent Mr. Sweet being destroyed. He doesn't prevent Mrs. Gillyflower from falling to her death. He doesn't really achieve anything in this story.
No, you're so right. That is a very astute observation. I was saying, because the Doctor doesn't turn up till about 15 minutes in, but it's a weird one because it doesn't necessarily feel like a Doctor-like episode. Like, this feels incredibly deliberately written the way it is. It's not like they were like, "Oh shoot, Matt Smith's not really available for this one. Let's write around him." I agree with Hamish that it really feels like a backdoor pilot for a Paternoster Gang episode, because you're so right that the reason the day is saved is Clara throws the chair in, but even that doesn't stop it. It's that Vastra and Strax, I believe, no, Vastra and Jenny have gone and taken out the venom from the ship, and then when it goes and it explodes and it was meant to like throw the venom everywhere, like they've already fixed it, and it was them that saved the Doctor. Like, this really does feel like I really agree with what he says as well about how, like, I think that's maybe one of the reasons why I cling to it, because I really wanted that itch scratched for a Paternoster Gang episode. I really like it when they come back, and it does feel like that's what this was intended to be.
Yeah, in a way you can see it being like an early script where this was just a Paternoster story, and they later were like, "No, we do need to have a Doctor in this one." Actually, they're like, "Oh, fine."
If you had told me that this was an episode from, because I also feel like the Paternostery episodes tonally feel quite different, certainly in the scenes that they're in. There's a lot of humour. It's very like detective-y. It's quite Sherlock-y, which we talked quite a lot about in our last episode when we looked at Deep Breath, because I feel like that has a similar tone when we're with the gang. But when you see them in their environment, I think when they're in the Doctor's environment, in, for example, A Good Man Goes to War or The Name of the Doctor, they're kind of used differently. But when you see them in the context of like Victorian England, they very much have their own tone. And like, I just love when they're funny. I love when they use funny. But if you told me that this was taken from an episode of the Patmos Scan spin-off, and this is just the episode the Doctor's featured in, a bit like how the Doctor popped up in the Sarah Jane Adventures every so often. I completely believe you. You could put a different title sequence on this, and I would believe you that this was a pilot for that.
Can I start hating now? Because you've led me to a good point.
Go for it.
I hate the title sequence. I hate it. Okay, fine, like maybe the passing through all the red clouds and whatever is fine, kind of. It's giving like, when people like do TikToks about how you can like really maximize PowerPoint and you can use like morph effects to make your presentations crazy. That is kind of what this gives, is just like, whoa, where are we going? Whoa. And so it's okay. It's definitely the poor man's 2024 title sequence. But the bit that really jars me is then the title, which is Doctor Who logo.png, kind of flickers in with this horrible effects. Mm-hmm. It looks like a 2D logo with a drop shadow. And then that goes, and then you have this horrible vortex, similar to the effect they use for Capaldi's era, but in red. And it looks like a screensaver, not like anything with real depth. It doesn't look like a real thing. That bothered me. And then it does the most criminal thing, which is that horrible transition where the TARDIS like spins in, and then it
the doors open.
Pulls up to the doors, and the doors open. But the doors don't even like really open. They kind of just like shrink to the sides to kind of create space. And it's the way I
completely forgot I did that.
And it like flies up and then like stops dead, like just stops static. It's horrible. It really gives like not even a CBBC show. Like Confidential had better titles than this 10 years prior.
Do you know what I think about this? Is that like I think that at this point they'd stopped trying to make it look like a time vortex, and they had just started trying to be like, what cool weird effects can we do? Because we said about this last week when we talked about Capaldi's titles, and I think you're right that it does feel very similar, but in red. That in the series 1 to 4 time vortex, it looks like an actual vortex, and like in 2024 Doctor Who, it looks the same. And I even do get that with the cloudy grey version from Matt Smith's first era, and I really get it in a really amazing way in 13's era. I think that's an amazing time vortex.
Yes,
it feels big and dangerous and like you're flying through something. Whereas in this, in the Name of the Doctor episode, you see a clip of like a first Doctor era, like Type 40 TARDIS flying through it. And it looks like it's on a piece of string and just
awful.
like flying through it. It really is not very good.
Because I just think it's inexcusable for a show whose like famous legacy is having such interesting and experimental opening titles all the way through its original run. Like if you think about the original 1963 titles, and it was like a scan of a camera, and it was all weird inverted effects. Like it's quite hard, I think, to make the Doctor Who titles look bad or cheap, like because you can literally make them cheap and make them look cool if you just put the effort into it. And people were making, I remember really clearly around this time, I'm fairly sure it was the guy John Smith who then went on to actually work on the visual effects for a lot of Jodie's era and the very tail end of Capaldi's era, which is, by the way, when the time vortex started looking good again in Twice Upon a Time or whatever it was. And he was making fan ones where the TARDIS like flew through all these different environments. So it kind of went through like a rocky volcano, and then it was flying through Gallifrey, and then it was into the vortex, and it looked amazing. And it was like a fan-made title sequence. And I just
need to look these up.
Couldn't quite understand like what was happening over at the BBC, like what brief was given that was just like, we need a new sequence delivered, and it was just given to someone who just did not care like how it really came out. They were like, well, they asked for a vortex, and that's a vortex. That's there.
It's really funny. I'm just looking up now Capaldi's time vortex, and then specifically looking up the time vortex from Twice Upon a Time when he'd started. And it is so much better.
It's completely different.
It's completely different.
But I think
it's so much better.
That to me just looks like someone who really cared about it and was really passionate about doing it well, who just went above and beyond to be really creative in the way they did it. And I'm sorry that man, but whoever did these titles, they're loveless. they're loveless.
You know what? That's a
flat.
very fair. I feel that more so even about Series 7A when they just slapped on a coloured filter and made the text have a weird,
Awful.
like, again, .png texture. Like, really not good.
It's
really
giving
not good.
like we could do that in house. We don't need a professional to do that. It's fine. Like, I know Premiere Pro. I can do that. and everyone was like, yeah, that's okay. Yeah, we can broadcast that. That's fine.
Sure.
In
Why
like
not?
in the anniversary year, no, not for me.
It makes me very glad that they chose. I remember when they didn't put a title sequence on the 50th anniversary, and I was really, that's annoying. Like, why don't we get a really cool anniversary? And I still think we could have had a cool, unique anniversary one. But it just makes me glad that this isn't the title sequence at the beginning of the 50th.
Yeah. Into the actual story, into something else.
Into the actual story. So obviously, like we were saying, we open with the Paternoster gang, and the first 15 minutes is very much just a Paternoster story.
Yeah.
One thing that I really loved, and again, I'm a defender of this. I'm a defender.
Just do
I
it,
like
girl.
humor in the
Do
Paternoster gang. I've heard people even interacting with this podcast say that they don't like when they play for humor, and they like when, like, for example, Strax is just like a Sontaran. But like Laura said in the bit when he's like, we can do this, and we could kill him like this, and we could do this, and Vaster's like, Strax, you're getting excited, go out outside. And he's like, I'm going to go play with my grenades.
They were really funny.
They're really funny, and the bit that I really love is when Strax is going to kill the horse, and he's like, the fourth one this week, and I'm not even hungry. And then that kid's like, oh, you're trying to go to Sweetville, take the first right, then turn left, then hop, and he's like, what's your name, boy? Thomas, sir. Thomas. Well, Thomas, I think you'll do just fine. I just think that is so stupid, and I love it, and it has no reason to be in the episode.
It doesn't. And I think jokes like that I'm less warm about because the rest of the story just puts me in a bad mood. And actually, like, in the context of a better story, I think I'd be like all-time best joke. I think the Paternoster...
I think it's like almost up there with the newspaper thing for me.
The Tom Tom one specifically, I think, has kind of just aged poorly because it's just like no one uses Tom Toms anymore, and it was a joke that just about worked then at the advent of like Google Maps on smartphones. But the humor's good. The humor's really good. Strax is really funny. I can't be mad about it because he consistently makes me laugh. Like everything he says, the like putting down the horse thing was really funny because it reminded me of me playing Red Dead Redemption. Just like, horse, we are lost. And then summary execution for the horse was really funny. I realized I've really been calling for essentially the Straxification of the Daleks. Every time I'm like, the Daleks should be comedy characters. I've really been calling for them to be Straxified, which does work, clearly is funny when you take like a classic villain and you decide like, look, it's a dumpy potato, it's only so scary we can make this. Let's just make it a comedy character. And it works, but it makes the Sontarans so difficult, at least in that design, to take seriously ever again, because
3,000%.
You can no longer see them as scary because they're clearly ridiculous. Like, you know what I mean? They can be subdued and turned into a very docile Strax figure.
No, 100%. I think that both the Sontarans and the Silurians have suffered from this, and that's why up until fairly recently we hadn't had a Sontaran story and we hadn't had a Silurian story. And even in the War with the Sontarans, I mean, it's one that I really would like to rewatch. I would quite like to at some point, and please listeners, let me know if you'd like this too. I'd quite like to do a 6-week stint. Well, 5 weeks, we've already done one of them, but properly look at the Flux and like go back and look at the Flux. But War of the Sontarans, I enjoyed it as an episode, and it is, I think, one of the highlights of the Flux serial for me. But I really didn't like how they pushed so much humor onto the Sontarans in a context that didn't warrant it. I feel like with Strax you get away from it because he has really been so far removed from what a Sontaran is that I don't even really like count him as a Sontaran, you know? But then when like the Sontaran was in the shop and it's meant to be they've redesigned them, they're looking a bit more gross, they're battle worn, and then it's like, and I think it's also played by Dan Starkey, and they're like, chocolate, like like that.
The chocolate
I was just
gag
like,
was really not. It didn't land.
No.
It specifically works in the context of this little dynamic in Victorian England, usually with Clara pottering around somewhere. and everyone being like,
Yeah.
Strax, and him being like, melt them with acid. It does just kind of work. But with Sontarans more broadly, like the chocolate gag, it was just kind of like, what? Like, what?
Yeah,
Why would
you can't?
It's like, their weakness, like Sontarans, like they love chocolate too much. I was like, what? What are we doing? What do you mean? What do you mean?
I don't. Yeah, I think that I love it so much, but it does only work in this dynamic with these characters, and that's why I'm curious what a spin-off would be. And I actually do have a little a fun idea later. I thought it'd be cute in this episode to go down. But yeah, it does make me really wonder what the spin-off would have been like.
Yeah. To talk about another character's design, then the design of people who have the crimson horror havers, people living with crimson horror.
Crimson horrors.
Crimson horrors.
People. Crimson Dorad.
I think there's a great idea in there. I think there's something really scary in there about being, preserved by, dipped in this fat and then drowning, but being sort of kept, I guess, in some kind of like semi-alive state in a glass jar pumped full of air. Yeah. And not really being aware of any of it. And, or like the process going wrong and then you're just kind of cooked and waxed and that being really, it's a good idea. In execution, I felt that the first time they pulled back the like Undertaker's sheet and you see the person with their mouth open and they're just going, oh, I just couldn't, like, we both laughed, and it's not meant, I don't think it's meant to be funny, it's funny, like, it's funny. I don't know, I feel like there was probably a better way of making it really scary and really horrible, but then I guess they have to like toe that Doctor Who line of it can't be too freaky for kids pre-Watershed.
Well, this is the thing, like, I think because of the nature of it being the Paternoster Gang and having the humour, I don't think that they wanted to lean too much into the humour of it. I don't think they wanted to lean too much into the horror of it. But I agree with you that I think in this kind of story, I kind of alluded to it before, but I guess that's what I want to talk about for a bit, is that there's a lot that could have been done with this story to make it very good. But because it's sort of confined within this bubble of the tone they were imagining for the Paternoster Gang spin-off, it stops them from being able to go too far. So I think that they could have, I completely agree, made them a lot more scary and threatening. Because when you see the Matt Smith one, like at first, like in that, like when he's like got his arm reached out and he can't really talk, you're like, oh, this is really unnerving. But then when you see him like waddle down the corridor by Jenny and is just kind of like yeah, you lose any kind of threat from it.
Well, also Matt Smith's like perfect hair was still doing its little quiff thing throughout. Do you know what I mean? Like his little swishy brown thing was still flopping around, looking absolutely fine. I don't know. I just saw it and I was like, oh, that's Matt Smith painted bread. He wasn't, it's meant to be like waxy, but it didn't look like a horrible kind of glossy layer of wax all over his body. It just looked like Matt Smith trying to hold his face as still as he could and going and kind of just limping around in supposed pain. It didn't work for me. And it's funny, I guess, because it's called The Crimson Horror and yet trying to keep it on a sort of kid-friendly side of horror maybe is what makes it not quite work for me.
No, I agree. And also, like I was saying earlier, I feel like there is a real story of like profiling what you imagine to be the perfect type of person, because a big part of this plot hinges on Mrs. Gillyflower wanting only the best, only the most perfect, beautiful looking people to be in her chosen few to survive. And I don't know about you, but I did not see one single person that was not a white person there. And I think there's a real story there that it could have been, I think if this story was made today, it would have been the dot and bubble of the series. And I think they would have tried to push a lot more of the idea that there's a real profiling there and there's prejudice and there's, they do dip their toes into the water of it, like about like disfigurement and abuse and prejudice, but it's never something that is delved into too much. And it's certainly, which is a bit weird in the context of who the Doctor is, it's not something the Doctor involves himself in at all. And I feel like that's another sort of reason why this episode might not be that great, is because they just don't allow themselves to like go too far with it.
Yeah, I think that I'd agree. I think it's trying to do a lot all at once. It's trying to say something about like fundamentalist religion and like I think like religious factions and denominations that are particularly orthodox and sort of as well, kind of what's the word for them? People who think the world is about to end. No, I can't remember. What's that called? There's a name for it, and it's trying to say something about that specifically with like lots of like religious language about New Jerusalem and going to Eden and all of that stuff and who gets to go, and it kind of approaches a point with that, and she's kind of preaching about morality, but you don't hear in much detail, I guess, like her manifesto for who's in and who's out. And then, yeah, there's something in there as well about kind of like Victorian eugenics, but I think nothing's explored in enough depth to really make a point strongly about any of those things. It just kind of, it feels like it gently brushes against some of those themes, and it's trying to fit a lot in, and then it swings from that through to like a Tom gag and that one guy who keeps fainting, and I didn't come away going like, that really moved me. That made that made a beautiful point about that was a potent warning that I will consider.
I agree. Yeah, I think it's very much confined to the limitations of them hedging their bets as to whether this Paternoster Gang spin-off would be a kids show, like what the tone would be, and also something that I think we kind of need to talk about. It's just peppered with this gross way that they're writing the 11th Doctor that I don't think features in anything outside of Series 7B, really. And I mean, the most obvious for this is that weird, gross sort of like sexual assault, for any other word, I don't know, of him like grabbing Jenny. Jenny's, helped revive him, and he grabs her, who he knows is queer and in love with Vastra, and just pulls her down and gives her a big smooch on the lips, and she pulls back and slaps him. He's kind of just like, haha, yes, I'm alive. And I'm just like, that's disgusting behavior. And I know that this is 2013, I'm looking at it from the lens of someone in 2024. Like, I understand it's a product of its time, but like, that's just a weird way to write the Doctor, right? Even then,
it was super weird. It's like just like leering ways, like Jenny, and then goes in for a big, and it I guess was just like, oh, it's just a moment of jubilation for the Doctor, and or also like maybe we're trying to do a little bit of a David Tennant 2.0, like make him a little bit of a swashbuckling sexy hero while we're at it. So maybe we're going to pepper a bit more sexuality into the character. Maybe we're going to pull back a little bit on. No, I'm not defending it. I'm just the intention. I think maybe they were just trying to we made him so awkward and so sex averse in Series 5 that maybe we're going to overcorrect this time.
Well, that's probably what they were trying to do, but like, it's not even the case. It's like, it's just like, oh, it was a lapse in like whatever. Because like, then there's the weird boner gag when Jenny like strips clothes off and she's wearing like the leather, and he has the Sonic, and he's like, ooh, and it's a weird boner gag. And then there's another one later. I can't remember what it is. There's another one where he just keeps making these like sex jokes, and it's just like, yeah, sex jokes are fine. I think we've spoken about in the podcast before that when well placed, they're hilarious, but like, it just doesn't. I think because, like you said, you made a really good point that they had quite actively made him sexless, and he'd said before that he kind of considered the Doctor asexual, and then he really started becoming like, oh, you sexy thing, and then you obviously have like the whole a mystery wrapped in enigma and a skirt and then the nonsense, and it's just like, it doesn't work. It doesn't work.
It's quite impressive to make Matt Smith like unsexy. He's quite naturally fit.
Yeah.
Like his whole thing in House of the Dragon as Damon, he's really strangely attractive. Not strangely attractive. I don't mean strangely attractive. There's something in him doing very unsexy things, but he just has like a presence that's very hot, and to somehow sap that out a bit, I don't know, is quite impressive. It's a bit the whole character of the Doctor in the story I felt was a bit off. Like, he doesn't turn up until the 15-minute mark. Whatever, fine, Doctor Light story, that's not necessarily an issue. If anything, it's quite interesting. But then they do the entire backstory anyway through a grainy filter, so it's kind of just the story shown in the wrong order, and at like triple speed. And then he feels like he just kind of parked his values a bit in the story. I don't know, like he does say some nice things to Ada specifically, which some of our listeners talked about. But outside of that, I feel like he didn't have much to say to Mrs. gillyweed, gillyflower, gillypond, and like there was no big doctory speech about like what you're doing here is so wrong and you couldn't be more wrong about the human race and you couldn't da. There was maybe an opportunity there for a little bit of a doctory lecture about like blah 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 blah. It feels like the Doctor just sort of lets things play out around him. We find him captured and Clara also captured, and both of them sort of like ready for death. Saved by the Paternoster gang. Excellent. He gets back on his feet. Doesn't add a lot. Jenny's the one who then saves him. Clara's then the one who throws the chair through the controls. And then Miss Gillypond falls to her death, cracks her back, and he goes, oof. And I was like, oh. And then there's this like unique form of life hobbling around on the floor, and the Doctor's like, I'll probably take it to the Jurassic era. And then along comes Daughter and starts mashing it to bits, wiping it out. And he's like, oh, well, on second thoughts. And I was like, oh, it just felt like he was very like, whap, whap. Oh, well, the rocket even takes off and he's like, oh, no. He sort of looks up and then they turn up with it. Oh, it's all right, we've got the poison. Oh, no. Oh, it's fine then. It was just, he just was so passive in this story.
But this is why I feel like it's an active decision to have it be a backdoor pilot for the Patnos Gang spin-off, because this doesn't feel like it was written like to cover up his filming schedule or something. And I think that it was written to be like, look, the gang can hold their own. The Doctor didn't have to be right. They saved him. They're here for like that's how I read it. I read it as them quite deliberately showing that when the Doctor is in their setting, they're the ones who sometimes have the upper hand, and they're the ones who like are doing the saving. And it's I feel like more and more as I watch these episodes with them in, I feel like the Crimson Horror is the one that is most a pilot for their own show.
He's got such a fascination with the Victorian era Stephen Moffat. He loves it. It feels like this kind of story, particularly like he didn't write this one, I know, but in, I guess, briefing the story to Mark Gatiss and giving a bit of direction on what he wanted from it, it feels like he was just itching for more Sherlock, even in Doctor Who.
Yeah. Well, in The Snowmen, there's the bit, and what's actually funny, I was going to save my fun facts, but this episode was actually in majority filmed before The Snowmen. So this episode was the first time that Niamh McIntosh, Catherine Stewart, and Dan Starkey had worked on the show since A Good Man Goes to War. And it feels like, because there's that bit in The Snowman where the Doctor comes in dressed as Sherlock, like he's like, oh, it's me, Sherlock Holmes. And it just does feel like that this was kind of his outlet, both because he enjoyed Sherlock, but also because the fans kept begging for that Doctor Who Sherlock crossover. This was his way of being like, we're never going to do it, but
sure, here's
this is my way of like winking to you.
Right, okay. Yeah, fair enough. But then... even with the Doctor being redundant, I feel like Clara becomes even more secondary in this. Clara really is just there in this episode for a lot of it. Like, they barely let her...
They made her throw the chair.
She got to throw the chair. She barely gets to speak. There's several parts in this as well where she's like, Doctor, the Jimmy's like, shut up. We're well beyond that. She's like,
there's one bit where he like says something, I can't remember what it is, and she kind of just looks at him and goes like, like she doesn't even say anything, like, but this is my example of poor Clara writing when she was first introduced. I do think the chair bit where he goes, I've got a sonic screwdriver. Yeah, well, I've got a chair. That's a really camp line.
Yeah.
But it's like the only good line she has.
A lot of it, Clara just kind of, again, like is there just kind of observing things as they happen. Just kind of standing by.
I liked the flashback. To when they went back and it was all like old-timey. But again, Clara like didn't speak in the whole thing, except for like she asks Mrs. Gillyflower something in a northern accent, but that's just to reinforce the Doctor's joke in that he's doing a northern accent.
I felt it was really clear to me as well that like the closing scene of them leaving and the flashback scene was not even filmed on the same day, but within the same like 2 hours. It was just like when we got to the end, I was like, oh, it's that scene. Right, this is when you filmed that. Like, it was so clear, like, same light, same time of day, same costumes.
I don't know if this is true, but do you remember in the 2013 proms, they had that little mini-sode where the Doctor and Clara won the ticket and they scratched it off and then they appeared in the prom?
Oh, that feels right. Do you think that was also on this day?
I think that was filmed in that exact corridor where that TARDIS exactly was, but they just dressed it with like a poster and a bench in the background. They were like, see, it's not Victorian England anymore. Like, I don't know if that's true, but that feels correct in my spirit.
There's elements to this story, and I can't explain. I really can't pin my finger on what I mean by this, where like things are just about competent enough. Like the lighting's good, the CGI's fine. Like the cameras are lovely cinema cameras, nice colors, etc. But there's just elements of it that production wise just feel like sometimes a little bit cheap, or just give a slight feeling of we're against the clock. Like we got a lot to do. This is, I don't know. There's something off about the season.
I get that.
I can feel chaos behind the scenes, and I can't tell you where I feel it from. Maybe I'm projecting it.
No, I think that's a very astute observation. I feel like I think series 7A, they were like, right, okay, we've got 5 more episodes with the ponds and we're going to do them. And I don't think it's a perfect arc, but they felt quite deliberate and like they knew what they were doing. Whereas this felt a little bit more like they had an idea and they hadn't fully fleshed it out. And I'll be honest, not one of the episodes in series 7B do I think is like a perfectly good episode. Like they all have fun. Like I actually, like I said, really like this episode, but there isn't a single episode in series 7B. People always be like, "Where's Octon?" I don't think that there is an unflawed episode in this arc of Doctor Who.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, every episode of the Doctor Who's got flaws, right? And this is in itself
I know.
The problem with this show is it is kind of like 50 shows in one. And people have such different ideas about the kind of thing they like. Like some people love this episode. They love this style as well. They love this kind of Mark Gatiss episode. And they're like, this is my Who. Yeah. This is what I love. This is peak. And for me, this just doesn't click. And that's just me. That's just my thing. Like I like a different kind of Who story and a different style.
Yeah, and that's fair.
Which is fine. But that's, I think, why Who fans will always be disappointed, because everyone has something different they want it to be. And which is like a blessing and a curse, because you've got a gigantic back catalogue of great stories and all these different eras and different actors. And there's always something that you can dip into that you'll like. But yeah, that's, you know.
Yeah.
Can I bring up a pretty big complaint of mine?
Oh, what have you been doing so far?
This might be my biggest. This, so boyfriend of the pod, Josh, was watching this with me. And I'd clocked this and hadn't said it. And he was like, the music is all over the place. And I was like, I'm so glad he said that. I'm so glad he said that. The music in this episode is appalling. So I know that they have to reuse music in Doctor Who. Like, not every episode can have its own score. It's massively time intensive. It's expensive. That's fine. Like, we reuse music. Like, people clocked in season 1 that the music that plays when the 14th Doctor goes into his new TARDIS and runs around plays again in the end of Boom. And people were like, why did they use that song again? And people were saying, like, well, because they have to reuse songs from time to time. You're allowed to do that. It's a similar vibe. It's what it is. The music does fit. In this one,
you hate it. I know you hate it.
It's not just that it was reused, it's that I could pin exactly where the music had come from before, because it had either just been recorded for a very specific moment in a previous episode, or because they played it more than once in this episode. So, for example, there is a bit of music that one thing that stood out. One, there's a moment when Clara goes like, the chimney. And he goes, oh, Clara, the chimney, of course, the chimney with no smoke. And a really intense version of dun, 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 dun at the wrong time starts playing. Like, it doesn't match the tone of that moment. It's very clearly the score taken from like a different episode that they've already done. It stands out a little bit. It's not that bad. It's a little bit off. The bit that really stands out to me, this is a deep cut. If you remember, what was it called? It was the Widow and the Wardrobe story, the Christmas episode.
Oh, the Doctor, the Widow and the Wardrobe.
Yes. There's a piece of music that they have released on whichever soundtrack that is, and it's a music that plays at the very beginning of the episode when the Doctor is escaping the spaceship, and he's like blowing it up, and then he falls to Earth. And he is like, oh, come here, spacesuit, come to me, and he like tumbles to Earth. And that music is very distinctive in my mind. And they play that entire track from that entire opening through part of this, where like Mrs. Pennywater reveals her
Mrs. Pennywater.
when she like reveals the controls and they play that whole song, and it ends up not matching, because towards the end of that sequence I think the doctor finds Ava on the floor or something happens, and Ava's actually like, oh, my monster. And the music is really jovial and really and it doesn't match like the tone of what's happening on the screen, which is like a tender moment of like, oh, Ada, it's you. Oh, Ada, you're on the floor. So that bothered me. And then later on, I think as we get towards the final scene, it really did feel that someone had been tasked with, Murray hasn't got any more music for this episode. Can you have a look through this library?
Have a look through the back catalogue
of Series 7 and 6 music and just have a rummage and see what you can make flow into other songs and make it sound right. Because there is one song they play in its entirety twice, and you can hear it's the same song starting again. And it's a variation of I'm the Doctor. And I guess they were like, and they wouldn't realize. I did, and it bothered me. And sometimes it just meant that the tone of what was happening on the screen didn't match the music. And that really felt messy.
See, this is where I think, love you and your soundtracks, but I didn't notice that at all.
Well, then it worked. It worked, didn't it? They got away with it.
No, I do agree with you that there are a lot of cases you do notice. Just in Doctor Who in general, and I think that the Boom example is a very good example where like even I clocked it. But I guess I don't know. It's just one, and it's a completely valid complaint. And I promise I'm not here to be like, you just need to not care as much. You just need to not, because there's so many things that just minute detail that like piss me the heart off in Doctor Who and in other shows and stuff. But it's just, I don't know, it's just not something that in this particular episode I noticed. I quite like the Paternoster Gang suite, and you're completely right again that they use it a lot. They're like dun, 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 like the Victorian-y Sherlock-y music that they use for them.
Yes,
I quite like it, as overused as it is. But yeah, I did clock the really intense I am the Doctor, because I just had a real moment of being like, oh, this is 2013. Yep, this is 2013. And I kind of like had that moment and then was like, oh, okay, it's done. But no, that's a completely valid thought. It's not something that I particularly noticed, but that's not to say that it wasn't annoying as hell.
Maybe it's just there if you listen tight. I've heard no one else mention it. Maybe it's just me.
But I bet now you've said it, we're gonna have lots of people tweet us and be like, you're so right.
It's the music from The Widow and the Wardrobe one. Is my first complaint. Doesn't match that sequence, in my opinion. And there's a piece they loop 2, maybe 3 times in the same kind of 10-minute stretch. To me, it stands out. But you might not notice, and that's fine.
You've got the ear for it.
And that's fine.
Well, look, we're getting towards the end of the episode. 2 things I just think of camp. One, Mr. Sweet. Just Mr. Sweet is like the little leech, the little like kind of like lizard thing. I think Laura said it, where it's like, not every episode needs to be a huge supervillain. I just think it's silly, and I love that it gets beaten to death. The second thing, I think it's camp and silly. I was going to say the return of, but I guess it's actually the inception of Clara's Victorian curly whirly hair. Love it. I have no clue how Victorian people would have made their hair that curly whirly, but I just love that in this one and then in the next Victorian episode she's in curly whirly Clara hair. I love it.
I love the curly hair. I think it was a great look. Someone said something like, oh, it's the one time that Clara had briefly the same hair as Stephen Moffat. And that was quite funny. There was a lot of camp moments as well. Like, let me say something positive about this. Like, I think my overall opinion of the episode is a bit sour, but it'd be amiss to not point out some of the like excellent campery, particularly the stuff that Diana Rigg did. One of my favourite lines was, kindly do not claw and slobber at my crinoline, was funny. I don't know what accent I just gave her. Funny. That was all over the place. And the other one was, I trust you've had a pleasant day, mother. Tolerable. Oh,
yeah,
and
she gets some really good lines.
Tolerable. And there's a bit where Ada comes through the door. So Mrs. Gillypond has just gone into her whole, like, oh, I was the one who experimented on her. It wasn't her dad. And she's announcing all this. And then suddenly cut to Ada who's just stood in the doorway. No one had her come in for some reason. And she's like, Mama, is it true? You hag. And then she sort of lurches for her.
You wench.
You wench. I like the Tegan reference, but even that, I felt that was delivered wrong, because he was like, oh, I had to take the Aussie girl to the airport. Oh, why do you have to do that? Oh, still not really sure. And then he goes, I felt like he was meant to go like Braveheart Clara, but he goes, Braveheart Clara. No, what does he go? He's a bit more like Braveheart Clara. And I'm like, no.
I don't know. He probably doesn't say it with it's meant to be like Braveheart Clara.
It was meant to be like Braveheart Clara, but he almost felt like Braveheart Clara. And I'm like, no, not quite.
No, you did it wrong.
You did.
Say
it again?
It's that like Matt Smith didn't know the reference.
There's just like, oh, that's my Braveheart Clara. And it's like, no, Braveheart, Clara.
There's a comma there. There's a comma
there.
You missed it.
There's a comma there. You wouldn't know because you left the script on the TARDIS during the 50th.
Oh my god. Well, look,
Anyway.
as we've been saying, that this is, it seems like, anyway, a big, I don't think it's confirmed. I don't actually know if it's ever confirmed that they were even imagining doing a Paternoster Gang spin-off. But as we've been talking about it being a backdoor pilot for Paternoster Gang, we never got that TV show. It doesn't exist. But we have had several series of Paternoster Gang Big Finish stories, and I don't think it's anything you or me have properly looked into. I thought I'd just read you a couple short synopses of some of the episodes to tell you what these stories might have been in this spin-off show.
Okay.
So I'll get like three. I'll get three different ones. So there's been several different episodes and several different stories out, and one of them was actually written by Dan Starkey as well, who played Strax. The very first one, so this would have, I assume, been the pilot of whatever this TV show was. It's called "The Cars That Ate London," and it says the advent of electric carriages on London streets cause a stir until they start careening out of control. Elsewhere, factory workers lose their senses, while a brand new power plant suffers mysterious outages. Genius industrialist Fabian Slowick has a vision for the future, free from population, running on clean electricity, but Madame Vastra knows that such ideas are ahead of their time. I could see that being a kind of story, because you've got to think there's not really, well, I mean, we'll find out in a minute, but there's not going to be really many alien stories. These are going to be very like London specific ones.
Yes.
Another story is called The Ghosts of Greenwich, and it says, strange things are happening to the people of Greenwich. Phantoms of the living appear, while others are aged beyond their years. A cloaked figure stalks the streets, and time is out of joint. Vastra, Jenny, and Strax find clues that point towards the Meridian Line. Beneath the Royal Observatory lies a secret, something terribly ancient and horribly dangerous.
Oh. See, these all sound great. Good pitches. Do these ever come books?
They're Big Finish stories. These are all Big Finish episodes. So it's got Dan Starkey and Eve
I'm so sorry.
So
I thought these were concepts. I misheard.
You think I'm making these up?
I'm so sorry. So have you listened
No,
to...
these are Big Finish stories with Dan Starkey and Eve McIntosh.
I didn't think you were making them up. I thought they were like abandoned concepts for a story.
Oh, no. These are Big Finish audio dramas. You can listen to them. I'll read you one more, and I actually am very interested with this one. It's called Truth and Bone, and it says, Bloomsbury troublemakers Don and Tom Foster are back. I mean, we don't know who they are, but I'm assuming they're in these stories. And in much more trouble than ever before, Sontar has turned its attention to Earth as requisitioner Skark is looking to retrieve missing soldiers. Jenny finds Vastra preoccupied with the past, which may lead to a very dark future. And on the cover for this one, it's got obviously the Paternoster Gang. It's got another Sontaran in the background, and then it's got a third Doctor-era Silurian in the back. So from what I gather, this story is about Sontarans trying to sort of retrieve Strax and like get back some of their soldiers. And then there's also a story involvement from another sort of species of Silurian, the same breed of species that the third Doctor met. And I think that is where you could really have some fun with this. Like, lean into the fact that these aren't just a random three. This is a human, a Silurian, and a Sontaran, and what problems that causes.
These sound great. These do sound great. Where would this have lived on television?
I think that it would have been either... You know, I thought it was going to be a CBBC thing, and I don't think that's true. I think it would have been a BBC Three spin-off.
Yeah, that makes sense. Or straight to iPlayer a la Class.
Straight to iPlayer a la Class or BBC Three.
Yeah. And I would have given it a good go.
Yeah, I would have enjoyed it. I gave Class a good go, and we'll talk about that at some point.
We actually still need to get to that, yes.
We do. It's on the list. Well, look, wouldn't it be camp? I mean, I'll quickly say about it at the end, but we've got an idea of what the next sort of like chapter of Wholala episodes are going to be, and we're coming really close up to the 100th anniversary. The 100th episode of Wholala, the second year anniversary. Wouldn't it be camp if we did Class for our 100th episode?
Oh no, it wouldn't. Boycott.
Well, I'll tell you what is camp. Maybe a little bit damp.
Oh, what's that then?
It's our little game of Camp or Damp.
Oh my god!
Well, for anyone who has never listened to an episode of Wholala before, we love to play a little game called Camp or Damp, where we look back on moments from the episode that we've just watched, and we say whether they were camp or whether they were damp. Alice, are you ready?
I'm ready.
You're ready. Thomas, camp or damp?
Thomas. You know what is quite camp? Thomas's delivery, the way he talks about, all right, then they're left. He's camp. The interaction is, you know what? Yeah, it's so left field, a sat-nav joke where the Victorian child is a Tom himself. It's camp, sure.
I wonder how many of our like Gen Z listeners would have to be explained to them now in the year of our Lord 2024 what a Tom is.
So we used to have these sat-navs, but they weren't in your phone. You had to attach them to your windscreen.
Attach them to car. You can maybe put them on your air vent as well, some of them.
Yeah.
Yeah? Well, I've got a chair, camp or damp.
I've got a chair. It was all right. It was fine. Is it camp?
I don't think it's damp.
It's not damp. It's just kind of sitting there. It's kind of just like, yeah, okay.
It's not damp, but it's not dry.
It's
not
no,
dry.
it's just like,
That sounded like a very good Peter Griffin impression.
yeah.
Yeah, Lois. And finally, Mr. Speech the Red Leech, camp or damp?
Mr. Sweet, the Red Leech. This is a really big question. Is he camp? Oh. I like when he turns his little Mr. Sweet head and he's just left Dame Diana Riggs' slimy chest.
Bosom.
I didn't know.
Well, you know what? I'll add in a little bonus one. I normally do 3, I'll add in 4. Symbiotic.
Symbiotic is, yeah, fine, camp. We can finish on a camp.
Well, off the back of that, I've got a couple fun facts for you. And so close to the 100th episode of Wholala, this episode is the 100th episode since the return of Doctor Who in 2005.
This is the 100th episode.
Yeah, Crimson Horror is the 100th episode since Rose.
So there was, and that was just nothing to mark that in this at all.
It was just a normal episode. They didn't make any marker of it. They didn't do anything. I do get, because Russell says before, they were like, "Oh, you're going to do anything for the 20th anniversary of New Who?" And he was like, "Well, no, we just had the 60th. Like, that'd be a bit weird." And I was like,
I
fair.
guess, yeah. But like 20 years of New Who feels like that's quite a thing. I guess 100 episodes of New Who isn't necessarily a milestone, is it?
No, I do want them. I don't necessarily need a special, but I would maybe like, I don't know, a multi-Doctor, just normal series finale, or like a multi-villain series, like something to mark the occasion in some way, even if it's not an anniversary special. So Stephen Moffat had originally hoped to write this episode, but he was also writing The Snowman at the same time. You know how they like double up an episode and they'll film 2 at once? They did that with The Snowman, because obviously it's like the same actors, same set, same sort of block. But it turned out that The Snowman took a lot more of his focus than he originally thought, so he passed it on to Mark Gatiss. But the original plot for this episode would have had a focus on the Match Girls strike of 1888, which was a real event, with the monster being born from the phosphorus in the matches. I like the idea of marking it in some, like when you're doing a historical episode, marking it in some kind of historical accurate like timing. I think that's quite fun.
That's nice. That's a nice detail.
And this marks the first time in New Who that someone has worked out that their friend, the companion of the Doctor, is a time traveller without having been in the TARDIS themselves or met the Doctor. These kids do what Torchwood have been trying to do for like 100 years. Like, they really were like, "Oh, it's a photo of you. I saw it at school."
Yeah, I don't know how they actually found any of those photos. One, they were like, "Oh, we saw that in school." And then the Victorian Clara, there's no explanation for. So they had some.
Like, it's you.
They
reverse image search it.
Yeah, but just some. But you'd have to have the original picture in the first place. You can't just put in someone's face into Google Images and it comes up with every picture of their face through time.
It did make me think, like, in the amount of stories that they've had set in the past, I wonder how many photos of Doctors and Companions are just out there. It's very like Clive circa Rose. They're just out there.
I love that. And I love as well that she recognises a picture of her in that outfit as wrong. She's like, no, I haven't done that. That's the wrong time, or that's the wrong place. That's London. I wasn't in London. And which is funny that she gives that away to the kids. She's like, no, I was in Yorkshire. But
and then she's like, "Oop!"
I missed that detail. Whoops! But doesn't consider that could be a future her, I guess.
Yeah, you'd think like it could be an adventure you've just not done yet. Like time is wibbly wobbly timey wimey.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much, dear listener, for joining us as we take this trip into Victorian Yorkshire. as we rewatched the Crimson Horror. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, we would love to hear from you. Or even if you didn't, let us know. What do you think of the Crimson Horror? You can reach out to us on any of our social media accounts. We're at HulalaPod everywhere, which is X, Instagram, TikTok, and Threads. And you can also rewatch old episodes of the podcast on our YouTube channel, which is at HulalaPod.
And if you enjoyed this episode, you can rate it 5 stars. You can follow us wherever you're listening so you get notified about new episodes. You can support us on Coffee, buy us a coffee, ko-fi coffee/Wholala, I think. And there's another thing. Oh, yeah, share it with someone who you think will enjoy the episode. Or indeed, if this wasn't a very good episode, go back, find one that was good, send them that one and say, this is a better example.
Exactly. Now, as I said earlier, I'm very excited for the next few weeks because we are, I'm not going to spoil it all, but you'll probably get it. We're going to watch 3 very important episodes which have something to do with the companion of this episode and maybe a future Doctor. Very important 3 episodes, that's all I'll say.
Very important. Very important. Get your guesses in.
Get your guesses in. Well, we look forward to seeing you next week when we'll be watching the first of these 3 stories.
Yes, we will. Come back to see what it is.
See you soon. Bye.
See you then. Bye.